Hi, I'm Matthew Arcilia, and I'm here with Christopher Natsuume at the GG Network Media Room at ESGS 2017, brought to you by MSI and Mountain Dew. Yeah, so Chris, you're from BoomZap Entertainment, and you're working on a new game. Can you tell me more about it?
Yeah, sure. So, hi everybody. I don't know if I'm supposed to look at the camera, but I'm going to. Hey. Anyway, so I'm from BoomZap Entertainment. We're a Southeast Asian, sort of pan-Southeast Asian studio. We've been around for about 12 years. This is our third ESGS, and we're super proud to be here to actually, we're announcing and letting people play our new game for the very first time. It's called Last Regiment. It's the new game in our sort of strategy series of games. It's our second big turn-based strategy game. We actually
serious. So you mean like you've done one of these before?
Well, actually, it was 2 years ago. We came and announced Legends of Kalesia, which was our first strategy game from sort of a strategy arm of the company that we're building, and we had great luck with that. We were really excited to be here at ESGS for that a couple years back, and so when we kind of finished that game and we got it out and we got people into it, it did very well and we were very happy with it. But there was a lot of stuff where we said like, yeah, those were first strategy game mistakes. We should make a better game. And so we kind of put together a list of all the stuff that we wished we could have done in our first strategy game and how we could have done it better. And when we put that all together, we were like, okay, we could make a sequel to the first one, but one of the big changes we wanted was a better story and a better world and a better lore. So we said, you know what, let's start from the very beginning. Let's make a brand new strategy game, and that became Last Regiment. And so it's like everything that we learned from our last strategy game put into a brand new game that's just across the board a stronger, better game. And we wanted to, get some people involved in it and get some people playing it, and we thought ESGS is the place to do it. This is our spiritual home here in the Philippines. We thought this was the best place to introduce it to the audience, and we've had a great show.
So what do you think you've learned here at ESGS in demonstrating the game to other people?
Well, this is the first time that we've let strangers put their hands on the game, right? And so obviously when you make a game, you have a lot of ideas about, I think this is good, or we should do this thing, or we should do it this way. But when you actually put somebody who doesn't have that history in their head on the game, they see the decisions that you made, and they don't know why you made them. We know why we did the things we did. And so when they see it, it's almost like seeing your game with brand new, fresh eyes. And a lot of stuff that to you makes sense because there's a path by which you got to that decision. When a brand new player gets into it, they don't know why you did that, and they're like, hey, this is not good, this is stupid.
And so what things have people questioned, or what kind of stuff?
A lot of it is usability stuff. I don't know how to do this thing. I don't know why this thing does this way. I don't know where the button to do this is. Oh, how does this unit work? And so what we've found through making strategy games is the sort of number one issue is communication. If I have to make you go read something about how it works, I've failed, right? I need you to be able to look at the screen, see what's going on, and immediately say like, okay, I know how that works. And so one of the things I'm really thrilled about is when we put somebody in front of the game right now, within about 2 minutes, they're playing. And I'm not saying anything, I'm just standing and watching. And that's thrilling for me because it means that it's a very understandable game and people are really immediately understanding why it's cool and what's fun to do in it. But there have been a couple things where they were like, okay, I don't know what this unit does, or I don't know what these numbers are.
I understand that in the past, BoomZap Entertainment has worked on casual games, hidden object stuff, mobile stuff. What kind of lessons do you say what kind of lessons do you say that you're able to take to the game, from another genre?
So we do have a long history of casual games and that sort of thing. We actually were one of the major providers of hidden object games to the casual game universe for quite a while. And those users are very, very different than strategy game users. To begin with, they're old. When we were making hidden object games, our core user was female and about 65. And so what a 65-year-old woman is willing to learn about a game, how much is she willing to invest in trying to figure out how to play it? Very, very little, right? And so we got very good at understanding how to make games easy to understand.
How to manage patience, how to manage things like that. Yeah.
Exactly. So when we moved into strategy, obviously that's a very different user. These are people who have a long history of playing games. They have a lot of sort of innate knowledge about how games work and how things happen.
And what their expectations are, basically.
Their expectations are much, much higher, but they also have a lot more experience that they can bring to it. But also on a negative side, that they've got 15 or 20 games that they've played before, and they say, well...
They've got core assumptions sort of like locked
in. Exactly. So they're like, why does this not work like League of Legends? Why does this not work like Hearthstone? Because they've been playing a lot of those games. And so we have to be very aware of those sort of mental barriers in their heads and make sure that we're explaining what we're doing to them. On the other side, though, I come from, personally, a big board gaming background, a big Dungeons and Dragons background. If I look around this game convention, there's a lot of, super high intense games and racing games and dancing games. I've been in games, in video games now for 25 years. That's not my history in video games. My history is in Heroes of Might and Magic and Civilization and quiet, thoughtful games, right? Or in board games, things like Axis and Allies or Diplomacy, right? And so what we're really trying to do with BoomZap strategy games and with Last Regiment, which we're working on now, is to bring that sense of quiet, thoughtful video game play, but without you have to play it all weekend for it to be any fun, which, for me is the real challenge. I'm older, obviously. I'm in my 40s. I have kids. I have a wife. I don't have all weekend to play a video game anymore.
You don't have consecutive 4-hour nights to invest like you did when you're younger.
Exactly, and especially if I want to play multiplayer, the big problem is all my friends are like me. So if I want to play, say, a multiplayer version of Civilization, that's like a week-long event, right?
And a week-long planning.
Exactly. And trying to organize something like that is almost impossible. So what I really wanted to do with the BoomZap strategy games, and especially with Last Regiment, is to put together all of the stuff that's fun in a strategy game that I'm used to. Building things, building units, attacking units, buffing units, all that kind of thing. To have a turn-based gameplay, a thoughtful, quiet turn-based gameplay, but to do it in a game session of about 2 to 3 hours at most.
So what kind of milieu does Last Regiment kind of skew towards? Like, what's the flavor? Like, paint me a picture of what this world is and what we're managing.
When we started it, one of the big comments that we got from our last strategy game was people were really interested in the lore. And so I wanted to spend some serious quality time building an interesting fantasy world. But one of the problems is, we live in a fantasy-aware environment. People have seen elves and orcs and goblins. They know what all that looks like, right?
The tropes are embedded in our DNA.
Everybody knows it, right? And so I wanted to start from a different jumping point. And so I said, what if instead of thinking about a fantasy world being rooted in the Middle Ages, what if we rooted this fantasy world in right around 1750, in the time of colonization? And what if we talked about these issues of colonization? What if the units in the game had muskets and frigates and galleons? What if we talked about what would it be like to have that world, but also to have magic? And I spent a lot of time reading about the British East India Company and their experiences in India and Southeast Asia. And I thought, what a fascinating history. And so we took that world and said, what if that were a fantasy world? And so the back history of Last Regiment is that there is an ancient continent called Kothia. And in the ancient continent of Kothia, there had been a colonial development hundreds of years ago that had been defeated. The local population of Kothia, who are elves and orcs and magic-using creatures, created these constructs, these sort of living machines. And the living machines had gone and created, had sort of gotten out of control. And when the living machines had gotten out of control, the elves fought that by bringing spirits of nature out. And suddenly the world was sort of an apocalyptic wasteland of these spirits of nature fighting these intelligent machines. And everything got so bad that everyone sort of had to hole up in caves and little places. And so the world falls into an apocalypse, right? And the colonial folks from the old world, they leave. And they forget about this continent because, wow, that's a really bad place. And so hundreds of years pass, and they decide to do a reconquest of Kothia. And so our game takes place in that reconquest of this ancient land, where these ancient machines are still available, where these ancient forest spirits are still available, and where these death spirits that have been brought out by the orcs are available. But we're coming into this with muskets and guns and galleons and all of this modern technology. So it's a very, very different fantasy universe with a lot of really interesting units. We have, dragoons riding griffins. We have monkeys riding on elephants. We have a whole world of very interesting fantasy creatures.
So yeah, this world sounds really rich, but like, is there a mechanical hook that you're kind of hanging the game on?
Absolutely. So when we made our last strategy game, the biggest success of it was simultaneous turn-based combat. And this was the one thing we really wanted to bring into Last Regiment because it's really fun. When I say simultaneous turn-based combat, what that means is if I think about a normal turn-based strategy game, like you'll take a turn, he'll take a turn, he'll take a turn, I'll take a turn, and that's like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. It's really slow, right? So instead, what we say is everybody plans their turn at exactly the same time. And then we all resolve our turn at the same time. It does two things. One, the game goes a lot faster, right? Because I only have to wait for 2 or 3 minutes for everyone to plan their turn, and then I get to see everything resolve. So the game's quite speedy. But the really nice thing is it changes the strategy entirely. In a normal strategy game, I'm reacting to what you did. But in this, I have to predict what I think you're going to do, and I have to plan based on that. It's a mechanic, to be honest, I stole out of the old board game Diplomacy. I don't know if you've ever played Diplomacy.
I've heard of Diplomacy.
It's a wonderful game. I used to play tournament Diplomacy when I was younger. And, in Diplomacy, it's the exact same thing. Everybody writes down their turns, you put it on a hat, and you draw them out, and then you see what happened. And one of the really fun things about Diplomacy that we are bringing into Last Regiment, which we also had in Legends of Kalesia, is an interactive alliance system. So when you start the game, you and I might be allied, and maybe those guys over there are allied, but halfway through the game, I can go chat to this guy and say like, all right, I'm totally going to screw this guy over in a minute, and we're going to ally up. And so you can actually change allies in the middle of the game. But of course, you don't know that I'm going to do that until our turn resolves.
Yeah.
So I'll come to you and I'll say, move that guy here, and you attack here, and you do this thing. And then I go over to him and I say, okay, I told him to do this stuff, but what we're actually going to do is this other stuff. And then when the resolution happens, you're like, whoa, what did you just do? And so there's these wonderful salty moments where you're like, oh, I thought he was going to do this, but he did this other thing, and now I'm totally screwed. And that's something you can't get in a normal turn-based strategy game, right? Yeah. So it's something that our particular design really lends itself to. The other thing that we wanted to do is we wanted to keep the gameplay quite straightforward and simple, because we want to keep the game at sort of a smaller gameplay timing. So the maps are playable. If you're playing like a 2-player game, 45 minutes to an hour. If you're playing like a big 8-player game, maybe 2 hours, 3 hours tops. So these are games that you can have dinner, and then after dinner, you and your friends are like, okay, let's play some games for a little bit, and you can start and end a full session of the game in multiplayer. There's also with the game, and this is something that is a learning from our last game, is we found that people really wanted more from their single-player game. They really wanted a long campaign. They wanted lots of actions. So we're in the process of building that. There's a deep story with characters that you meet, sort of different missions with different goals. So there's a very deep single-player mission, and also there's a quite fascinating multiplayer segment in the game as well.
So when's the game coming out, and on what platforms?
So we are right now still in quite early development, and I'm very excited to bring a game in early development to ESGS because it's been wonderful getting feedback early enough that we can actually do something about it.
Yeah.
We will hopefully be moving into early access on Steam in early 2018, and then we'll probably be going into full launch sometime in the late spring, early summer. And we'll be on PC and Mac. We'll also be doing a version of the game for tablets on iOS and Android. And the game will be designed so that you can play on any one of those devices versus any of the other devices. So if you're on PC and I'm on Mac and he's on iOS, we can all play in the same game together.
Fantastic. Looking forward to losing some friendships.
It's one other thing I'll mention. The game will also ship with a full editor. And so not only will you get to play all the levels and stuff that we build, you'll actually be able to make your own levels and upload your own levels and comment on other people's levels and share levels. So we're hoping that we can develop a really strong map building community and people who are really involved in wanting to grow the game that way as well.
All right. Thanks so much for talking about Last Regiment with us.